Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are staring into the face of a paradox, a really stark, uncomfortable one. Imagine a country hurling itself towards the future, skyscrapers going up, rockets launching, the economy booming, the Sensex hitting new highs. It feels like a party, right?
From a distance, yes.
Yeah.
It looks like unstoppable progress.
But then you look down at the street level, or maybe you look into the rural heartlands where the mines are dug. Or even just behind the closed doors of a modern upper-middle-class apartment in a metro city.
And you see cracks.
Deep, ancient cracks that seem to be getting wider, not smaller.
It is the defining contradiction of our times. We're discussing Chapter 25 of Essential Sociology by Nitin Sangwan, titled Challenges of Social Transformation. And honestly, if you're a student of sociology, or specifically a UPSC aspirant, this chapter is where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
This is where theory stops being abstract. It stops being about what Marx said in the 19th century and starts explaining the headlines you read this morning on your phone.
Exactly. It feels like everything we've talked about in previous deep dives leads here. And to set the scene, the source material actually starts with a gut punch. It doesn't ease us in with a definition.
No, it doesn't.
It brings up the 2012 Nirbhaya case.
It does. And it uses that tragedy not just as a crime report, but as a sociological milestone. Think about the context of 2012. India was shining.
The India shining narrative was everywhere.
The metro was running in Delhi. We had malls, smartphones, the internet. And yet, in that moving bus, a brutality occurred that belonged to the Dark Ages. It symbolized the unsafe nature of society, despite all our modernization.
And the part that always haunts me, the part the text zeroes in on, is the involvement of the juvenile.
Precisely. That is the sociological key. You had a juvenile perpetrator, a child of this very same modernizing society, showing a complete lack of socialization.
A total void.
It exposed that economic growth can coexist perfectly well with deep-seated social regression. We built the hardware of a modern nation, but the software, the values, the ethics crashed.
That is a terrifying thought, but one we have to unpack today. The paradox of transformation. Now, before we get into the heavy lifting, and we have a massive amount to cover, from displacement to gender violence to the shape-shifting nature of caste politics, I need to make a very special introduction.
Okay.
This isn't just any deep dive. We are recording this special edition powered by Simplified UPSC by PPP.
That's right. This is a dedicated resource for the serious aspirant who wants to move beyond just reading the book to actually understanding how to score marks.
So to everyone listening, especially if you have your prelims or mains coming up, we have a humble request. If you find value in what we're doing, please subscribe to the YouTube channel.
It really helps.
It really does boost retention and gets this content to the people who need it. And if you are capable and want to ensure we can keep bringing you these super useful deep dives, please consider supporting the team on Patreon. It makes a huge difference.
A huge, warm shout out to all the current supporters. You are the reason this content exists. We see you and we appreciate you.
Absolutely. Also, don't forget to like the audio or video and share your valuable comments. We want to hear your take debate with us in the comments.
Please do.
And for the resources, because we know you need notes, there are free notes with practice previous year questions or PYQs available on the public Telegram channel right now.
But, and this is for the people who really want to lock in that rank, for those who want the full arsenal, there's a private Telegram library.
Okay, what does that include?
That gives you access to all the series videos, organized premium notes, detailed explanations, extra PYQs, and this is gold model mains answers. You know, the actual structure of how to write the answer.
That's incredibly valuable. How do they join?
You can just direct message on the public Telegram channel to join that.
Okay, housekeeping done. Let's look at the roadmap. We are decoding challenges of social transformation. We're going to break this down into 3 massive pillars today, right?
Correct. First, we're tackling the crisis of development. This covers the ugly side of growth, displacement, and the environment. Second, we're looking at gender and violence, specifically the structural versus the cultural causes.
Okay.
And third, we're diving into the shapeshifters, caste, ethnicity, and religious revivalism. And the mission for today is strategic. We are linking every single concept to actual UPSC mains questions from 2016 to 2023.
That is the exam angle I love. We aren't just learning, we are strategizing. So let's start with pillar 1, the crisis of development.
Let's do it.
I think most people hear development and they have a positive association. Better roads, better hospitals, higher GDP, more money in the pocket.
The common sense view, yes.
But the text quotes Yogendra Singh, defining it as a strategy of planned social change which is considered desirable by the members of the society. That sounds positive. desirable. So where is the crisis?
The crisis lies in that innocent-looking word, desirable.
Desirable for whom?
Exactly. Desirable for whom? That is the question sociology asks. And the expert in me has to point out the concept of undevelopment. It's a bit of a twist, and it sounds counterintuitive.
Undevelopment, okay.
The argument is that the very process of development creates a shadow process of undevelopment for a significant chunk of the population.
Hold on, play devil's advocate with me for a second. Undevelopment. Isn't that just a fancy way of complaining about necessary progress? If we build a dam, yes, some people move, but millions get electricity. Isn't that a net positive?
That is the classic utilitarian argument. The greatest good for the greatest number.
Right.
And for a long time, that's how policymakers thought.
Right.
But sociology looks at the cost and who pays it. Undevelopment isn't just about inconvenience. It means the destruction of a way of life that cannot be replaced.
A way of life.
Think about it. When you build that dam, you aren't just moving people from house A to house B. You are severing their connection to the land, their kinship networks, their deities, their livelihood.
Their entire world.
You are taking a self-sufficient community, maybe a tribal community that lived off the forest, and turning them into landless wage laborers in a slum on the outskirts of a city they don't know.
That is undevelopment.
That is undevelopment. You have actively made their lives worse, more precarious, more alienated, even if the national GDP goes up by a percentage point.
Okay, that paints a much, much bleaker picture. It's not just a move, it's a dismantling of their existence.
Precisely. It's a paradox where growth for some leads to displacement, emotional trauma, and environmental carnage for others. And we aren't just talking about a few unfortunate families. Let's look at the hard data provided in the source.
This is what we need for the exam.
This is crucial for your answers. Seat Fernandez, 1990. He estimated around 30 million people were displaced in India due to development projects just in the first few decades after independence.
30 million. 30. That's the population of a medium-sized country.
It's staggering.
That's like the entire population of Australia being told to pack up and leave.
It is. And here is the kicker, the statistic that should make your blood run cold. More than 42% of those displaced were tribals.
42%.
Now think about the demographics of India. Tribals are roughly 8% to 9% of the total population.
Okay.
Yet they bear nearly half the burden of displacement.
So an 8% group is taking a 42% hit.
This shows that development is not neutral. It is structurally biased against the vulnerable. It targets those with the least political voice to fight back, those whose lands are rich in resources, but whose legal titles are weak.
That is a staggering statistic. If I'm writing an answer, that 42% figure is going right in the introduction. It frames the entire problem.
It has to. It proves you aren't just writing opinions, you have sociological evidence. And the text mentions a concept called multiple displacements, which sounds like a nightmare straight out of Kafka.
Multiple displacements. Explain that. That sounds horrific.
It is a tragedy of planning. Take the Rihan Dam or the Hirakud Dam or the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited HAL examples mentioned in the text.
Okay.
Imagine a tribal family. In the 1950s, the government builds a dam. Their village is submerged. They're displaced. They move 20 miles away, clear some forest, try to rebuild their lives.
A tough start, but okay.
20 years later, the government finds coal in that new area. They need the coal to feed the power plant at the dam. So the mines open. The family is displaced again.
Oh, no.
Then, because there is power and coal, an industrial township is built. They are displaced a third time.
My God. You can't put down roots. You can't build a community. You're just being tossed around like tumbleweeds by the state. You become a refugee in your own country.
Exactly. And for decades, this was just accepted. This brings us to the necessary evil debate. Traditional thinking, and even colonial thinking, viewed displacement as a necessary evil for the greater good. The state needs power, therefore a few thousand villagers must move.
The omelets and broken eggs argument?
Right, but the sociological lens challenges this. It asks, why is the greater good always defined by the urban elite, while the sacrifice is always made by the rural poor? Why are the eggs always from someone else's basket?
And the laws have struggled to catch up, right? The text mentions the difference between the colonial laws and the new ones.
Yes, this is a very important legal context for your answers. The 1894 Land Acquisition Act was a colonial instrument.
1894, so British era.
Exactly. It basically said the state has eminent domain. It can take whatever it wants for public purpose. Crucially, it only recognized legal owners, people with paper deeds.
And in India, who doesn't have formal paper land titles?
Tribals, forest dwellers, The rural poor who have lived there for centuries based on customary rights, not stamped paper.
Of course.
So their dispossession was legal, but sociologically devastating.
Right.
They got zero compensation because they had no papers, their entire world was taken, and the law said they owned nothing.
This injustice must have led to pushback.
It did. It led to resistance. The text highlights the Silent Valley Project in Kerala, a massive environmental movement,
I've heard of that one.
and of course the Narmada Bachau Andolan in Gujarat, led by Mehta Patkar, and more recently, the violent clashes in Mandigram in West Bengal and Bada Parsal in UP. These weren't just riots. They were social movements, asserting that development cannot just be a top-down mandate. These movements forced the government to bring in the 2013 Land Acquisition Act, which finally talks about consent, social impact assessment, and rehabilitation.
So there has been some progress, legally at least.
Progress on paper. The implementation is another story, but the discourse has shifted from eminent domain to human rights.
Okay, let's pivot to the exam. I want to get granular here. If I'm sitting in the exam hall and I see a question on this, how do I structure the answer?
Good, let's workshop it.
Take the 2023 Paper 2, Question 5A. Citing some case studies, expand the concept of development-induced displacement.
Okay, let's build a model structure for this. 10 marks. You have about 7 minutes.
Right.
Introduction. You start by defining displacement not just as physical movement, but as undevelopment, using the concept we discussed. You can say it creates a culture of uncertainty and disrupts social capital.
Okay, that's a strong start. Use the jargon.
Body paragraph 1. They data. Quote Fernandez, 1990. The 30 million figure. The 42% tribal figure. This establishes the magnitude and the bias of the problem. Don't just state it, say what it implies.
That it's a structural problem, not an accident.
Exactly. Body paragraph 2, the mechanism. Explain why it happens. The clash between national interest, dams, mines, and local livelihood. Mention the colonial legacy of the 1894 Act and its failure to recognize customary rights.
Got it.
Body paragraph 3. Case studies. This is where you score the marks. Don't just list names. Briefly explain the Narmada case, linking it to loss of biodiversity and tribal culture. Or mention the Ryan case as a classic example of multiple displacements.
So 1 or 2 sentences per case study, just to show I know what they are.
Yes. And then the conclusion. Conclude with the shift in perspective. Move from the necessary evil model to a rights-based approach, citing the 2013 Act as an example of this shift. You could even throw in Amartya Sen's idea of development as expanding freedoms, not just building dams.
That is brilliant. That is a roadmap to a 10-10 score. I can see a whole answer in my head now.
That's the goal.
What about the 2022 question? It was a bit more philosophical. The problem of displacement is inherent in the idea of development. Critically analyze.
Ooh, that's a good one. Inherent is the key word. You have to debate. Is it unavoidable?
So a simple yes or no won't work.
No, that's a general studies answer. For sociology, you need a dialectical approach.
Okay, so a thesis, antithesis, synthesis, structure.
Perfect. Thesis. Yes, to some extent it's inherent. Industrialization needs land. Land is occupied. So some displacement is inevitable in a capitalist model of development.
Okay, that's the realist position.
Antithesis. However, the nature and scale of displacement, the lack of consent, the brutal methods, the poor rehabilitation is a policy failure, not of natural law. It is a political choice.
The cruelty isn't inherent.
Precisely. Synthesis. Therefore, while some disruption may occur, the goal should be a model of development with dignity. We need to minimize displacement through better planning and technology and maximize just and fair rehabilitation. You engage with the dialectic there. You show the examiner you can think in shades of gray.
It seems like development is really a double-edged sword, and that leads us directly into the environment, because usually when we displace people, we are also disrupting the ecology.
They are twin crises. You cannot separate them. The same project that displaces a village also drowns a forest. The conflict is between industrialization and ecology.
And earlier I asked, is development always at the cost of nature?
And the source suggests that in the current global capitalist model, the answer is often yes. And it brings in a heavyweight theory here, which is great for adding depth to your answers. World systems theory by Emanuel Wallerstein and dependency theory by André Gunderfrank.
I remember this from college. Core versus periphery. But usually that's about money and trade. How does it fit into environmental issues in India?
This is a fantastic theoretical connection. World systems theory argues that the core countries, the rich West, the US, Europe, maintain their high standards of living and preserve their own environments by, well,
Outsourcing their pollution.
exactly. They export their dirty industries to the periphery and semi-periphery developing nations like India, Bangladesh, Brazil.
So they get to have clean air and national parks.
While we get the shipbreaking yards of Alang with workers dismantling toxic vessels with their bare hands, we get the electronic waste from their discarded iPhones, we get the factories that pollute our rivers to make cheap T-shirts for their markets.
This creates a culture of dependency.
Yes. We are structurally forced to destroy our own environment, to sell resources to the global market, just to service our debt and survive.
That is a depressing but powerful perspective. It means our environmental crisis isn't just local mismanagement, it's structural. It's part of the global design.
It is. And even within India, the impact isn't shared equally either, is it?
No, I was about to ask that.
Environmental degradation is not an equal opportunity offender. The text calls this out clearly. It has a class and caste bias.
How so?
Who suffers most when the local river is polluted with industrial effluent?
The poor, who rely on it for washing, for drinking, who can't afford to buy bottled water or install an RO system.
Who suffers from heat islands in concrete cities where temperatures are several degrees higher.
The slum dwellers who don't have air conditioning and live under tin roofs.
The rich can buy their way out of environmental collapse, at least for a while. They can live in gated communities with air purifiers. The poor cannot.
The source mentions the 2013 Uttarakhand floods and the 2023 Manipur floods.
Yes, these are cited as prime examples of consequences of indiscriminate human development.
Unpack that. Most people just call them natural disasters.
The sociologists would argue these are man-made disasters triggered by nature. The trigger was the rain, yes. But the disaster was written in the blueprint of the hotel built on a fragile riverbank.
So we build hotels on riverbanks in Uttarakhand to boost tourism, which is economic growth.
But we ignore the fragility of the Himalayas.
Huh.
We cut down the trees that hold the soil. Then the rain comes, the mountain comes down, and we call it an act of God.
It's an act of greed, is what you're saying.
It's an act of development that ignores ecology.
Yeah.
And for the mains exam,
Yes, let's connect it.
look at 2022 Paper 2, Question 8A. Is it possible to have sustainable development in India? Cite major environmental issues.
Okay.
Here, you don't just list air pollution, water pollution. Too simple. You have to discuss the tension, the trade-off.
The dilemma.
The dilemma. You have to write, India has a moral imperative to pull millions out of poverty. That requires industry. Industry requires energy and land. How do we balance that with our ecological commitments?
Right.
You should mention the World Bank 2013 report cited in the text, which says climate change creates a multiplier effect on poverty.
The multiplier effect.
Meaning, climate change doesn't just make things a little worse. It makes poverty exponentially harder to escape. If we don't fix the environment, poverty alleviation becomes impossible because the poor are constantly hit by floods, droughts, and crop failures.
So sustainable development isn't a luxury, it's a necessity for poverty removal.
That's the argument you make.
Yeah.
And question 8B from the same year was about the dialectics between development and environment.
Dialectics. There's that word again.
It's keyword. It means looking at the conflict between two opposing forces to find a new truth.
Oh.
Thesis, development, economic growth. Antithesis, environment, conservation. Synthesis, sustainable development.
Okay, that's the framework.
But don't just write the words. Explain the struggle. Explain how movements like the Chipko movement or Narmada Bachao Andalan were the antithesis in action, trying to correct the thesis of unbridled destructive growth. They force the state to think about a synthesis.
Okay, so we have covered the land and the air. Now let's talk about the people, specifically the women, Pillar 2. Violence against women and gender issues.
A crucial and difficult section.
We started with Nirbhaya, but I want to go deeper. The source uses that case to highlight a paradox. The rise of technology and modernization did not automatically lead to safety or dignity for women.
No.
In fact, it created new complexities.
It did. The text points out a deadly cocktail. Rise of technology plus indulgence of juveniles, plus lack of social awareness.
Let's break that down.
We have given young people, especially young men, access to the entire world via smartphones, unfiltered pornography, violent content, aggressive behavioral models from global culture.
Right, the technology part.
But we haven't updated our family structures, our educational systems, our community values to teach them about consent, respect, or gender equality.
So there's a gap.
It's a massive gap. The sociologist W.F. Ogburn calls this cultural lag. The material culture, the technology, changes very fast. The non-material culture, our values, our beliefs, our norms, lags far behind.
The phone is 5G, but the mindset is feudal.
That is a T-shirt slogan right there. It perfectly captures the crisis.
And structurally, the source talks about the patriarchal bargain. I've heard this term thrown around, but let's unpack it for the listener. The source says it was referenced in the 2018 PYQ analysis.
It's a concept by the sociologist Dennis Candioti. It's crucial because it explains behaviors that seem confusing on the surface.
Such as?
Sometimes we ask, why do women support patriarchy? Why is the mother-in-law often the cruelest to the daughter-in-law?
Right, it seems counterintuitive.
A patriarchal bargain is essentially a survival strategy. Women, finding themselves in a rigid, male-dominated system they cannot overthrow alone, realize it's too dangerous to fight it head-on.
So they bargain.
They bargain. They choose to accommodate or even uphold the rules, being submissive, enforcing strict rules on younger women in the household because obeying the system offers them some measure of security, protection, or status as they age.
So the mother-in-law enforces the rules on the new bride because, finally, at age 60, it's her turn to have a little bit of power in the house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She upholds the system because in her old age, that system is the only thing that guarantees her son will take care of her. It's a tragic cycle. She trades her individual freedom for long-term security.
That's a powerful and depressing insight.
If you use the term patriarchal bargain in an answer about domestic violence or family structure, you are showing the examiner you understand the deep mechanism of patriarchy, not just the obvious symptoms.
That makes so much sense. And the source also mentions invisible labor.
Yes.
We often think development means more jobs for everyone, but the text argues that this specific model of development often pushes women out of the visible, paid workforce.
This is the feminization of agriculture paradox, among other things.
Feminization. But you just said it pushes them out.
It pushes them into the most drudgerous, unpaid, or poorly paid parts of agriculture. As agriculture mechanizes, who gets to drive the new tractors?
The men.
Who operates the combine harvesters? Men. Women are pushed back into the labor-intensive, non-mechanized work, like weeding, transplanting, or collecting firewood. Or they are pushed entirely into domestic work, cooking, cleaning, childcare.
Which is crucial for the economy.
It is the bedrock of the economy. If women stop cooking, the men couldn't go to work. But it is unpaid. It's not counted in the GDP. It is invisible.
So development can actually increase their workload while simultaneously making their economic contribution invisible, thereby marginalizing them further.
Precisely. It strips them of economic independence and decision-making power.
There's this persistent assumption that education fixes everything. Betty Bachao, Betty Beteille. If we just educate girls, patriarchy will wither and die.
It's a lovely thought.
But the source seems very skeptical.
It is remarkably skeptical, and rightly so. Yeah, as the question earlier, we have more educated women, but are they safer? The answer, sociologically, is not necessarily. In fact, some data from the National Family Health Survey, NFHS, has shown that educated women sometimes face higher rates of reported domestic violence.
Wait, really? Why would that be? That seems completely backward.
Two main reasons. One, the positive reason is that they are more aware of their rights and more likely to report it, so the numbers go up.
Okay, that makes sense.
But two, and this is the dark side, an educated, earning woman can be perceived as a threat. She challenges the traditional authority of the husband and his family. She is uppity. She has opinions. This can cause what sociologists call status dissonance in the household.
Status dissonance.
And this dissonance can lead to violence as a way for the man to put her back in her place, to reassert his dominance.
My God, so her empowerment becomes the trigger for violence against her.
It can be. And this links directly to 2023 Paper 2, Question 5e. Does women's education help to eradicate patriarchal discriminations?
So the answer isn't a simple yes. It's much more complicated.
The answer is yes, but. You have to be nuanced. You must argue that education is a necessary condition, but not a sufficient one.
Okay.
If you educate a girl but then send her back into a family structure and a society that views her as a burden or a commodity, the education alone cannot save her. You need legal reforms, police sensitization, economic opportunities, and a change in social norms alongside it.
You need to bring in the patriarchal bargain, the cultural lag, and the safety issues. You need to argue for structural change alongside educational change.
Now you're thinking like a sociologist.
Okay, let's take a breath. We've covered development and gender. That's heavy stuff. Now let's move to the most ancient structure in India, which keeps reinventing itself. Pillar 3. Caste, ethnicity, and religious revivalism.
This is the shapeshifter section, always changing its form but never its essence.
You know, there was this modernization theory in the 1950s that predicted as India becomes modern with cities, factories, democracy, caste would just fade away. It would become irrelevant.
That was the secularization thesis applied to caste. The idea that rationality would triumph over tradition. And frankly, it failed.
It failed. You'd say that definitively.
Completely and utterly failed. Caste didn't disappear, it shape-shifted. The source uses a fantastic term for this, substantialization of caste.
Substantialization? That's a heavy word. What does that mean in plain English?
It means caste stopped being just a ritual or religious thing about who you can eat with, who you can touch, purity and pollution, and it became a substance, a solid, tangible block of power.
Oh.
It transformed into a political pressure group. In the past, castes fought over ritual status. M.N. Srinivas called this Sanskritization.
Right, trying to move up the ritual ladder.
Today, they fight for secular things. Jobs, reservations in education and government, political tickets, control over local resources. The conflict shifted from the temple to the parliament.
So instead of dissolving, it hardened into a political tool.
Exactly. And paradoxically, democracy actually gave caste a new lease on life.
How did democracy strengthen caste? That sounds so ironic.
Think about it. Democracy is a numbers game. To win an election, you need votes.
You need to mobilize people.
And what is the easiest, most readily available network for mobilization in India?
Family, kinship, caste.
Precisely. So castes organize themselves into vote banks. Caste associations, or savas, were formed to bargain with politicians. Give us a college in our district and our whole caste will vote for you.
That makes so much sense. You see it in every single election analysis. The Jat vote, the Dalit vote, the Yadav vote.
You do. And looking at the PYQs, 2023 Paper 2, Pew 1C, asked about the attributional versus interactional approach in studying caste.
How does that connect to what we're saying?
This is a classic theoretical question, but you can give it a modern twist. The attributional approach, like that of the early colonial census takers or even G.S. Gurry, looks at the fixed attributes of a caste. What makes a Brahmin? The sacred thread, the rituals, the vegetarianism. It treats caste as a static list of traits.
A checklist.
A checklist. The interactional approach, championed by scholars like F.G. Beteille, looks at how castes actually interact in a village setting. Who gives water to whom? Who accepts food from whom? It's about the relationships.
Okay.
But the modern reality, the substantialized reality, is different. The key interaction today is not about food, but about votes. It's about political competition. So in your answer, you define the terms, but you conclude by saying that today, a purely interactional approach must focus on the political arena.
And 2020 Paper 2, Q6C, asked for measures to prevent caste conflicts. Based on this substantialization theory, you can't just say we should all be nice to each other.
No, that's a weak, moralistic answer.
Right.
If caste conflict today is fundamentally about competition for scarce resources, jobs, land, political power, then the solution must address the resources.
So?
You need effective land reform. You need widespread job creation so that communities aren't fighting over the same few government posts. You need to ensure equitable access to quality education. You address the structural causes of the competition, not just the attitudinal symptoms.
It's not about purity anymore. It's about power.
That's the one-liner to remember. And this bleeds directly into religion as well. The source talks about religious revivalism and communalism. Again, modernization theory said religion would fade. We'd all become rational, scientific secularists.
It didn't happen.
That definitely didn't happen. If anything, religion seems louder, more visible, and more aggressive in the public sphere now than it was in the 1960s. The text calls this the modernity paradox.
Why? Why is religion booming in the age of science and the internet?
The text gives three main reasons, and they are all sociologically fascinating. 1. Identity politics. Very similar to caste. Politicians use religion to mobilize voters. It's an effective tool for creating us versus them narratives.
Okay, that's straightforward.
2. Reaction to globalization. This is the really interesting one.
Go on.
Host, think about it. When McDonald's, Hollywood movies, Western fashion, and individualistic values flood your culture through TV and the internet, you can feel like you're losing your identity. You feel culturally homeless.
A sense of alienation.
A deep alienation. So what do? You cling tighter to what feels authentic and traditional, your religious identity. It becomes a shield, a safe harbor in a confusing world. Religious revivalism becomes a defense mechanism against what is perceived as Western cultural imperialism. You can take my economy, but you can't take my soul.
That's a powerful insight. It's not about hating science. It's about fearing the loss of identity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the third reason is, again, vote bank politics.
Yeah.
But here, I need to make a crucial distinction mentioned in the source, one that aspirants often mix up. Communalism versus fundamentalism.
Okay, unpack that. They sound similar.
They are not. Fundamentalism is an orthodox return to the text. It's an individual or a group saying, I want to live exactly as the original scripture dictates. It's often inward-looking. It's about personal piety. A true fundamentalist might withdraw from a corrupt modern society to live a pure life.
Okay.
Communalism is almost always outward-looking and political. It is using a religious identity as a badge to mobilize the community to gain political or economic power against another community. It's us versus them. You can be intensely communal without even being very religious yourself. You just use the label, I am Hindu, I am Muslim, I am Christian, to fight for power. It is a political ideology that wears a religious mask, not necessarily a spiritual belief.
That is a very subtle but incredibly important difference. One is about faith, the other is about friction and power.
And it links to 2023 Paper 2, Question 6a. Increasing significance of religion in public and personal spheres in the context of secularization thesis.
Right.
Here, you have to critique the secularization thesis. You argue that the thesis was Eurocentric. It was based on the European experience with the church. It failed to predict that in India, modernity and religion would not be enemies. In fact, they would become bedfellows. Religion has adapted to the modern world. It uses TV channels, the internet, social media, and democracy to expand its reach and influence.
So caste and religion, the old things, are actually very modern now in how they operate. They are modern avatars of ancient structures.
Perfectly put. They've weaponized modernity for their own purposes.
Okay, let's move to our next section, Section 5, Education.
Right.
We often talk about education as the silver bullet, the solution. Education is the key. But Section 5 of the source calls this the Panacea myth. We tend to think of education as the great equalizer, the panacea for all ills.
It is a myth we, as a society, love to believe. We love the story that if a poor child studies hard, they can become anything. The rags to riches narrative is very powerful.
But sociology is skeptical.
Sociology looks at the structure, not just the individual story. The text cites Marxist arguments, specifically from the French philosopher Louis Althusser.
Althusser, he talked about the ideological state apparatus, right? The ISA.
He did. He argued that institutions like the family, the media, and especially the education system don't just teach neutral facts. They primarily serve to reproduce the existing social order, the existing inequalities.
How does a school do that? It just teaches math and history.
Does it? Or does it teach the poor to be obedient, punctual workers? Follow the bell, sit in neat rows, don't question authority. And does it teach the rich to be leaders? Engage in critical thinking, participate in debate clubs, lead the student council. It subtly socializes people into their expected roles. It validates inequality. If a poor kid fails, we say, he didn't study hard.
We don't say his school had no roof, no library, and the teacher was absent for half the year.
We blame the victim, not the system. That's the ideological function.
And how does this play out in India specifically, according to the text?
Look at the stark hierarchy of schools.
Yeah.
This is the commercialization of education. You have elite international private schools, IB boards, air-conditioned classrooms, horse riding, coding classes from age 6.
Right.
Then you have crumbling government schools with missing teachers and no functional toilets. Are a child from the first school and a child from the second school really competing on a level playing field for the same UPSC exam?
It's not a level playing field. It's two different sports.
And the digital divide mentioned in the text makes this even worse, as we saw during the pandemic.
Oh, absolutely.
Education went online. If you had a laptop, a quiet room, and high-speed Wi-Fi, you continued to learn. If you were a migrant laborer's child with one shared feature phone and no data plan, your education effectively stopped for 2 years.
So instead of being an equalizer, education became a stratifier. It actively widened the gap.
It did. And the source mentions the new education policy, NEP 2020, in this context.
Right. For 2023 Paper 2, Question 5C, which asked about the salient features of the NEP, you can't just list the points from a government website.
You can't. You need to analyze it through this sociological lens of access and equity. Ask the critical questions. Does the NEP's focus on technology address the digital divide, or does it deepen it? Does the emphasis on vocational training for some risk creating a permanent skilled working class while others are pushed towards higher order thinking? Or does the flexibility of the curriculum actually help dropouts and marginalized students?
That critical eye is what gets you the marks.
Always. And specifically regarding 2022 Paper 2, Question 7b, educational development is the only panacea for countries' all ills and evils. Critically examine.
Critically examine is the code word for disagree with nuance.
Yes. You start by saying education is undoubtedly a powerful tool for social change, BUT, and then you launch your critique.
And I'd bring in Althusser.
You'd bring in Althusser's ideological state apparatus. You'd bring in the digital divide and the commercialization of schools. You'd bring in the problem of educated unemployment, where people have degrees but no jobs. You argue that education without corresponding economic opportunity and deep social reform leads to frustration, not development.
So we've gone through development, gender, caste, religion, education. It feels like there's a lot of tension here, a lot of conflict. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the negativity. Is there a way to make sense of all this chaos? A framework?
That is the perfect segue to Section 6, synthesis. How do we tie all these threads together into one coherent sociological argument?
Yes, please.
The source brings in a brilliant concept by the great Indian sociologist André Béteille: harmonic and disharmonic social structures.
Harmonic and disharmonic. Okay, this sounds like the capstone theory. Break it down for us.
Let's do it. Imagine traditional India, the caste system. It was deeply, profoundly unequal. The Brahmin was at the top, the Dalit was at the bottom. We can all agree on that.
Of course.
But Tevati, the value system of that time, the religious and social ideology, accepted that inequality as legitimate. It was justified by ideas of karma, dharma, purity, and pollution. The Dalit believed he was born to serve due to his past karma. The Brahmin believed he was born to rule.
So the reality and the belief system were aligned.
The reality, inequality matched the values, inequality. Béteille calls this a harmonic system. Now, let me be very clear. Harmonic does not mean good or just. It just means there was no fundamental conflict between what people believed and how society was structured. It was stable, albeit brutally oppressive.
I see. It was stable because everyone accepted their place, however unfair it was.
Exactly. Now look at modern India. After independence, we adopted a constitution. What does it promise?
Equality, liberty, justice, fraternity.
That is our new official value system. We teach every child in school, all Indians are my brothers and sisters. You are equal before the law.
Right.
But now look at our reality. Is it equal?
No, not at all.
It is still deeply unequal. Caste discrimination exists. Gender violence is rampant. The gap between rich and poor is widening. So the values, equality, clash violently with the reality.
Inequality.
The
I see that.
huge gap, this contradiction, creates what Beteille calls a disharmonic system.
So the values say equal, but the reality on the ground says unequal. And that friction causes the fire.
Precisely. That friction is the conflict we see every day. That is the source of the challenges of social transformation. Why are Dalits protesting and asserting their rights? Because the Constitution tells them they are equal, but the village power structure still treats them as unequal. They are no longer accepting the harmonic silence of the past.
Why are women marching for their rights?
Because the law says they are free and equal citizens, but the patriarchal bargain and social norms try to keep them submissive and confined to the home. All these conflicts, the caste movements, the feminist movements, the farmers' protests, are actually symptoms of this fundamental disharmony.
That is such a powerful framework. It explains everything we've talked about today. It's not that things are just randomly falling apart. It's that the reality hasn't caught up to the ideal we set for ourselves.
Yes. And for the mains exam, this is your golden conclusion. This is your synthesis.
How would I use it?
Look at 2023 Paper 2, Question 1D. Are tradition and modernity antithetical to each other?
Perfect question for this.
You use Beteille here. You say, no, they're not just simple opposites. They coexist in a complex, often tense, disharmonic relationship that drives social change. Modern values, the Constitution, are constantly in conflict with traditional structures, caste, patriarchy, and this conflict is the engine of transformation.
Wow, that really ties it all together. It turns the chaos into a theory.
It does. It gives you a theoretical capstone to hang all these separate issues on, showing you have a macro-sociological understanding.
So let's wrap this up. We've covered a massive amount of ground. We've seen how development can undevelop, how modern cities can harbor ancient prejudices, and how our entire system is fundamentally disharmonic.
If I had to summarize the key takeaways from Chapter 25 for your final revision: 1. Development is a double-edged sword. Never just praise it. Always look for the cost, specifically the undevelopment of the vulnerable.
Right.
2. Old hierarchies like caste and patriarchy are not dying. They are adapting. They are resilient shapeshifters that use modernity to their advantage.
Got it.
And 3, sociology requires looking beyond the common sense view. Education isn't always the great equalizer. Sometimes it's a barrier. Religion isn't disappearing. It's becoming a political force.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave the listener with a final thought, building on what you just said. We talked about disharmony. We talked about conflict. It's easy to look at India, the protests, the shouting on TV debates, the caste politics, the religious revivalism, and see utter chaos. You might think, is democracy failing? Is the country collapsing?
It's a common feeling. But here is the provocative thought I want you to mull over. What if this chaos is actually a sign of health?
A sign of health.
In a harmonic system, the old oppressive ways, there was peace, but it was the peace of the graveyard for the oppressed. There was no noise because there was no hope, no voice.
Silence was a sign of subjugation.
Yes. In a disharmonic system, there is noise, there is conflict, there is friction, but that friction is the sound of a society arguing with itself, trying to align its reality with its ideals. It's the sound of the previously silent finding their voice. So the final question is the chaos a sign of systemic collapse, or is it the necessary, painful churning the Samudra Manthan towards a more just and equal society?
That is something to chew on. Is the noise actually progress in disguise? The sound of a society trying to align its reality with its ideals?
I love that. A question every sociologist and every future civil servant must ask themselves.
Absolutely. Listen, we hope this deep dive has given you some aha moments for Chapter 25. Again, a huge, humble request. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Simplified UPSC by PPP. It helps us immensely and ensures we can keep doing this.
It really does.
And if you want to keep this series alive and thriving, please support us on Patreon. We cannot do this without you.
Thank you to every single supporter. You are the backbone of this project. We truly appreciate it.
And don't forget the Telegram channels. Free notes and practice PYQs are on the public channel. Get them now.
And for the serious prep, the premium notes, the detailed breakdowns, the model mains answers we talked about today, you want the private library. Just DM us on the public channel to join.
Right. Like the video or audio, and please leave a comment. Tell us what you thought about the disharmonic system concept. Did it click for you?
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Keep reading, keep questioning, and let's crack this paper. Until next time.
Goodbye and good luck.